My name is Drev-Saan. I hold the rank of Junior Compliance Technician, 3rd Tier, Drev-Saan Companion Integration Program, Sector Veth-Associan. I am filing this incident report at the direction of Program Director Veldrath, who has asked me to be thorough. I will be thorough. The subject arrived on the morning of intake day, processed through the Veth-Associan Integration Facility's standard biological reception corridor. She carried a single soft-sided container and a laminated transit credential, identifying her as Vos E, human, female, non-combatant logistics contractor, Class 0 threat designation, routed to us from the deathworld Biological Reclamation Program on what the transfer documents described as a voluntary reassignment. I later learned that no one had asked her. At the time, I did not know this. I was completing her biometric intake scan and noting that she was small, shorter than any of the other 12 human subjects we had processed in the previous rotation, with the particular quality of stillness that I would eventually come to understand as something other than compliance. She answered my intake questions in the flat, cooperative tone of someone who had answered a great many questions from a great many officials and had learned that the answers did not matter much either way. I asked her if she had any concerns about the program. She said no. She folded her transit credential and put it in her pocket. I noted this in her file as a marker of organizational tendency. The program directors would have called it a promising sign. The Drev-Saan Companion Integration Program had been running for 11 standard pre-rotations before I joined it. Its purpose, as Director Veldrath explained it to me on my first day, was the development of a behavioral modification protocol that would allow human subjects, sourced primarily from the deathworld network of biological reclamation facilities, to be integrated into high-function alien household and institutional settings as companion attendants. The humans, Director Veldrath explained, were unsuitable in their natural state, too contextual, too lateral. They processed threat information on too many simultaneous channels and responded to social hierarchies in ways that were, his word, unpredictable. The suppression compound resolved this. Introduced through the nutrition protocol on day 1, it attenuated the human's contextual threat modeling response by a target of 60% over 10 days. What remained, the directors had found, was compliant, warm, and manageable, suitable for companion function. I asked Director Veldrath, on that first day, what happened to the part of the response that was suppressed. He told me it simply became inactive, like a limb that is not used. I wrote this down. Vos E entered the suppression protocol on intake day. By day 3, her behavioral scores were tracking well within the expected attenuation curve. She participated in the companion response training sessions without resistance. She smiled when prompted. She ate what she was given. She folded her nutrition wrappers very flat and placed them precisely in the collection receptacle, which I noted but did not flag, because it was not on the checklist of behaviors requiring notation. By day 7, her contextual threat modeling index had reduced to 41% of baseline. Director Veldrath was pleased. He described her as one of their most responsive subjects. He showed her scores to Director Ossian Drev at their morning briefing, and Director Ossian Drev made a sound that, in the Drev-Saan academic cast, passes for enthusiasm. I was present at this briefing. I did not say what I had noticed. What I had noticed was this. On day 4, Vos E had asked me, during a routine compliance interview, how the facility's ventilation system was routed. She framed it as a concern about air quality. I told her the routing ran east to west, through the sub-corridor beneath the containment block, terminating at the exterior exchange manifold on the facility's northern face. She nodded. She did not ask a follow-up question. On day 6, during a supervised recreation interval in the shared transition corridor, I observed her counting her steps between the recreation threshold and the first checkpoint gate. She did this without appearing to count. Her lips did not move. She simply walked, and I only noticed because I was watching her face, and her eyes moved in a particular way. The way eyes move when a mind is doing arithmetic. On day 8, I observed her studying the hinges on the interior storage panel adjacent to her Sweets nutrition dispenser. She was doing this while appearing to look at the dispenser itself. I did not flag any of these observations. I do not have a sufficient explanation for why I did not flag them. I have thought about this since. I think the closest I can come is this. She was not doing anything. She was only noticing things. and noticing things is not in itself a violation of any protocol I had been given. On day 10, I left a cup of warm tea on the intake desk when I went to file the evening compliance reports. When I returned, the tea had cooled completely. I drank it anyway. This is not relevant to the incident. I include it because Director Veldrath said to be thorough. Day 11 was the final integration assessment. Directors Veldrath and Ozian Drev conducted the session themselves, which was unusual. They ran the full companion response battery on all 13 human subjects housed in the containment block. The results were, by their assessment, excellent. Voss E scored within acceptable parameters on every metric. She smiled when prompted. She answered companion function queries in the warm, cooperative register the protocol was designed to produce. After the assessment, the directors retired to the program observation suite on the upper tier to review the aggregate data. I filed the daily compliance reports. I finished the last of my evening tea. I locked the intake desk at 22 o'clock and went to my assigned rest quarters. At 03 o'clock, I was notified by the facility's automated monitoring system that subject Voss E had departed her suite. At 03:12, I arrived at the containment block. The door to her suite was open. The locking mechanism had not been forced. It had been operated correctly from the inside, using a tool fashioned from the foil lining of a nutrition packet that had been folded, over the course of 11 days, into a very precise shape. The tool was still in the lock. She had left it there. She had also left her nutrition wrappers in the collection receptacle, stacked in order of day, each one folded flat. At 03:40, I located her at the far end of the sub-corridor beneath the containment block, the one that runs east to west and terminates at the exterior exchange manifold on the northern face. She was not alone. Walking behind her, in single file, were 11 of the 12 remaining human subjects. She was not directing them. She was simply walking, and they were following. The 12th subject, a male human named Harrow T, was not with them. I found him at 04:15, already outside. He had gone ahead through the exchange manifold and was waiting at the facility's northern perimeter, sitting on a cargo pallet with his arms folded, watching the approach corridor with the particular quality of stillness that I had, by then, come to recognize. At 04 o'clock, before I found Harrow T, I went to the program observation suite to inform the directors. The observation suite was locked from the inside. I could hear Director Veldrath and Director Ozian Drev in there. They were not injured. They were very quiet. I asked, through the door, how they had come to be inside a locked storage room. Director Veldrath said, "She put us in here." I asked if she had used force. There was a pause. Director Veldrath said, "She asked us to step inside to review an anomalous reading on the Tier 2 monitoring panel." I asked if there had been an anomalous reading. Another pause. No. I asked if they had gone inside to check. The longest pause. Yes. She had locked the door from the outside using a second tool, fashioned, I later determined, from the rigid backing strip of her transit credential, which she had removed and retained on intake day when she folded the credential and put it in her pocket. I had noted this as a marker of organizational tendency. At 04:22, I found Voss E at the intake desk. She had located a release documentation form, DW41-0003, the standard multi-subject voluntary departure form, which had not been used before because the facility had never processed a voluntary departure, and she was completing it correctly. All 13 names, all 13 subject numbers, the correct departure classification codes, the routing designation for the nearest transit authority processing hub, the signature line for the authorizing compliance officer. My cold cup of tea was beside her. She had moved it to make room for the paperwork. She looked up when I came in. She said, "I need an authorized signature." I looked at her. I looked at the form. I looked at the tool she had used on the director's door, which she had placed neatly at the corner of the desk. I signed the form. I have included a copy with this report. Director Veldrath has asked me to note, for the record, that the suppression protocol performed as designed. The compound reduced subject Voss E. its contextual threat modeling response to 41% of her assessed baseline. He would like this to be understood as a success. I have included his characterization in this report. I have also included my own notation, which is this. The program was designed to suppress the part of the human threat response that decides whether to act. It succeeded. What it did not account for, what no one here had accounted for, is that this particular human had already decided. On intake day, when she folded her credential and put it in her pocket, when she asked me about the ventilation routing and listened to my answer and did not ask a follow-up question because she did not need one. The suppression compound worked on the part of her that was still making up its mind. The part that had already decided was not that part. Director Veldrath has suggested this observation is outside the scope of a compliance incident. Report. I am including it anyway. The form number is DW-41-0003. The 0003 means it is the third entry on record. The facility processed 2 departures before this one. Both were medical evacuations. This was not a medical evacuation. I have not yet determined what category it belongs in. I have stopped trying to find one.